The stone arches of the Nomai mines had almost stood until the end of time, but somebody moved the goalposts. The end just wouldn't come. The sky tore open over the platform. A black abyss manifested in the air, pulling and pushing existence around it. Air and space rippled and distorted around a ball of nothing. Just as quickly, it retreated. Reality forgot that it had been broken, and went right back to what it was doing. The two beings who dropped out of the warp bubble weren't the wise designers of these portals, just a couple of humble blue frog folk coming back home. Ponder blinked 4 wide eyes in wonder at the lush realm of origins. After the terribly confusing period called only the incident, Gabbro had shown everyone how to use all the ancient Nomai tech lying around. That was a while ago. Ponder was part of the first interplanetary generation, but Timber Hearth was still special to him. Gravel shuffled around the entry path before slumping into a rough wooden chair that was very out of place in the ruins. They seemed rather bored with it all. Blue, 3-fingered hands dug through their satchel and placed some snacks and a bottle of sap wine on the ornate stone table. Ponder took in the sunshine and the broad grasslands. Pieces of a disassembled spacesuit were bundled on their back and clinked together as the owner turned all about, admiring the landscape. A simple brown cowboy hat sheltered their eyes from the bright sun. In place of a feather, a long golden pine seed was tucked in their hat. These seeds have one long graceful wing, allowing them to spin and flutter on the wind in search of better soil. Then Ponder noticed the older Hearthians sitting and waiting, and almost prepared to grow roots. "You don't have to hold the return warp open for me. If I go back to Brittle Hollow, I'm going to be flying my new ship." Gravel's ears drooped. Their eyes opened with concern, or maybe just irritation. "Flying? Why would you do that? The warp towers are much safer." Ponder had heard that before. "But the warps only take you to a few places. With a ship, you can fly anywhere. You can explore." "Everything's explored," Gravel said with a lazy drawl. "The only good places to go have warp pads." Ponder could only shake their young head at the idea. Gravel got comfortable in the rickety seat, putting their hands behind their smooth head as if planning a nap. "I'm really not warping back, you know," Ponder said with determination. Gravel didn't even look at him. "Someone else might." Ponder gave the fellow a squint that turned into a knowing smile. "Ash Twin is too hot?" Gravel huffed, drained by the mention of it, even if it was the only difficult part of a gate watcher's job. "Ash Twin's too hot." The adventurer headed out on the 2-hour hike that would carry him to the village. Ponder had headed out early to give himself time to enjoy the scenery. The pine forests and geysers drew out a hint of nostalgia, even though they hadn't grown up here. Ponder was soon hiking the rim of the home crater, overlooking the village. The bustling settlement had grown to a sizable town, filling the chasm. It was a vast crater, but every inch was filled with trees and wooden buildings. Waterfalls and streams met in a geyser lake at the center of town, and the whole place was joined together by shoddy plank bridges. But Ponder didn't go down into town. They were headed to the one structure that had a good reason to peek over the edge of the crater, the observatory. Outer Wilds Ventures was finally open for new astronauts again. As Ponder passed through the timbers of the big doorway, they came to a monument, a shrine of sorts. The stone sculpture of a Nomai was as serene as ever. Gave Hearthians a weird, trippy feeling looking at the third eye on the relics. Ponder always admired them, even though they were funny looking. But this time, it wasn't a memorial to ancient history. A pine wreath hung around its long, stooping neck, and potted meadow flowers were tended religiously around it. The educational sign had been replaced by a tree stump with a beat-up training helmet resting on it. The new sign on the front of the stump said, "To my time, buddy." You did good, kid. You saved the world. We'll remember you longer than these memory statues." It was first penned by Gabbro, and signed by every member of Outer Wilds Ventures who'd known the hatchling. Ponder took their hat off to give the great adventurer a moment of respect. It was such a strange story, and more like a tall tale. Something, something, time loops and quantum something. But the hatchling was a hero, wherever they were. Ponder started to get a strange sensation that someone was watching him. Could be the lingering spirit of the hatchling, or just the Nomai mind tech doing its thing. The main gallery was a treasure trove of relics and knowledge. Most of the artifacts highlighted Nomai culture, but some of the worn-out gear of early explorers had become relics in their own right. Ponder had been here before, but there was so much to see that they didn't remember everything. Ponder fought the urge to admire the exhibits. Time had already slipped away. Were they late or early? They didn't see anyone who looked like they might be Hornfells. They'd only met the leader of ground control once before, and they might look different now. The only person there was a Hearthian Ponder's own age. They were wearing dark clothes, which was unusual for the earthy folks around here. A thorn the length of a hand hung from their neck as an ornament. The two locked eyes at the same time, and the stranger came to get acquainted. "You must be Ponder," the local said. "Cool to see a new recruit. Been a while." Ponder tipped their hat, glad to be appreciated. "And yourself?" "Score a die. Call me Score. Been helping Hornfells out with this place and the radio tower." "Pleased to meet you. You ever get out there yourself? As an astronaut?" "Nah. Between you and me, best place to be is that old radio tower. You can point the dish on that big old antenna anywhere you want. I'm supposed to keep an eye on the travelers and the satellites, navigation and such, but I prefer to point it out into the void. Sometimes you hear the patterns in the static. Better than music, you know." "I don't think I do know." Ponder scratched their neck. "Where's Hornfells?" "The old fella's upstairs, but you'll have to wait. Not to be disturbed. Important business." "Oh." The silence got a bit ungainly. Ponder was a bit nervous that they might not have much in common. Scorodite glanced around, making sure no one else was coming. "Hey, you want to see something?" Ponder followed curiously around the base of the observatory to the far exhibits. Score stopped next to a sealed tube of glass containing an extraterrestrial predator. It was a dark mass that seemed to be all mouth and teeth, peering out with a pair of empty, soulless eyes. The enclosure didn't need to be lit. The thing had a glowing protrusion hanging in front of its face, bright as a light bulb. Instead of water, the tank was filled with a kind of fog that glowed around the hunter's lure. Score turned their back to the tank and watched Ponder's expression, as if showing off their personal pet. "That's an anglerfish, right?" "Yeah, scary, isn't it?" Score said proudly. For all its vicious appearance, the creature floated in place insensibly, hovering in the low-pressure mixture of vapors that mimicked its native habitat. It didn't seem to perceive or react to anything around it. It would have passed for a model, but the mess of tentacles behind its mask-like face slowly stirred the vapors behind it. Ponder faintly recalled it being there when they came to the museum as a hatchling. They had refused to go anywhere near the tank. They were a little too young for the spooky stuff at the time. Ponder thought it would seem smaller now that they'd grown, but maybe the fish had grown too. "It's not really a fish." Score turned and observed it. "I think it's more like a mollusk." "A mollusk?" "Yeah. Ever seen a fish with tentacles?" Score reasoned. It's closer to snails, creek wiggles, or the jellyfish on Giant's Deep. Ponder thought about it and gave a low hum. I guess that makes sense, but the face looks like a fish. Score crossed their arms and made a smug smile. Nope, doesn't have gills, can't be a fish. I guess you're right, Ponder said, acknowledging the expert in the room. Against their better judgment, they studied it closer, leaning in as close as nerves would allow. The way it moves, it's almost like it's breathing. Does it have lungs? I don't think mollusks have lungs. Score shot him a quick frown. Hey, shut up. Watch this. Score headed for the side door, motioning for Ponder to stay put. Ponder wanted to see what they were doing. Turning away from the tank was a little uncomfortable, even though the animal was motionless behind thick glass. Score returned, holding something behind their back. The smell of bait wafted in with them. The keeper nodded toward the angler, making sure Ponder didn't miss it. The creature pivoted, flexing its tendrils and aiming its jaws directly at Score. The jaded Hearthian held a big brook trout, dangling it where the angler could see. Ponder pulled their head back with a start. I thought they were blind. They lose sight when they're older, or bigger. Not sure which one does it, the keeper explained. Come on, Score said, apparently talking to the not fish. Come on, show me. They held the limp trout by the tail, moving it closer to the glass. Getting no reaction, Score pulled it back. Hey, you know what I want. The Hearthian locked eyes with the eerie creature and gave it a firmer command. Show me. To Ponder's surprise, the thing seemed to listen. Their amazement only grew as they watched. From behind its hard, leathery face, its paler tentacles stretched out further and further. Somewhere in the wriggling mass, a dark, fleshy body emerged. More and more swelled out, apparently producing matter from thin air. What came out from behind it was much bigger than the angler's original size. It kept going until the pointed tips of its feelers touched the glass on both sides. What? How did it do that? Ponder's mouth hung open for a moment at the ominous sight. It was as big as Ponder. That thing fills up half the tank. That's dark Bramble for you. Things there can be a lot bigger than they look. Ponder furrowed their brow. It was frustrating when things didn't follow the rules. It didn't even have the decency to stay the same size all the way through. That doesn't make any... A raspy challenge bellowed out. The monster opened its mouth as wide as Ponder's chest and rammed its tusks into the glass. Yeah! Ponder cried out and jumped back. Ha ha! Score laughed at him. The anglerfish was still trapped in the aerospace-grade container, though it left scratches on the surface. All right, easy. Score tried to calm the creature and finally brought its food closer. Here it comes. They opened the lid of the tube built into the top of the tank. The long, sleek trout slid in, and Score sealed it again. The angler retracted its body and waited at the top of the tank. As soon as its meal came into sight, the trout was devoured without a trace. The Bramble predator shrank to its previous size and hovered in the center of the container once again. It didn't look big enough to have eaten a trout that size. The noise of strange gizmos sounded out from the control room above them. Beep, buzz. Printing. Sounds like Hornfills is ready for you. Ponder was happy to go up the spiral ramp and leave the space fish behind. More than that, ground control. Folks could tour the museum, but they weren't allowed up here. Ponder came to the top of the ramp and found himself in the middle of a large wooden dome packed with computers and radios and charts. The biggest thing was, of course, the big telescope. They stopped to gawk at a beautifully rendered map in the center of the room, and were amazed to see each planet slowly turning as they moved on their clockwork tracks. A studious old Hearthian in a cozy green sweater was seated at a desk close to the telescope. They moved an empty cocoa mug aside to spread out the freshly printed charts. The needle had sketched out some kind of seismic pattern, but in a circle. "Hi, Hornfels?" "Oh, there you are, Ponder." A kindly smile spread across the scientist's face. They took off their reading glasses and set them on the desk before rising to their feet with a little effort. "I didn't mean to keep you waiting. I just had to measure the shadow. You can only see it twice a cycle. I'm tracking the growth rate so that—" They trailed off. "Oh, well, you don't want to hear about that." "If it interests you, I'm sure it's interesting." "Oh, really?" Hornfels clasped their hands together, pleased to see that classic Hearthian curiosity. "You'd be a good student. Oh, I'm so jealous of Feldspar. No, don't get me started or you'll be here for days." "I'm interested in you. Our first astronaut in, well, forever. Nobody's been interested in spaceflight ever since the warp towers opened. Not except Hal. I think they just wanted to look for their friend." "Oh, Hal was a friend of the hatchling?" Ponder realized. "I actually met them on Brittle Hollow once. They let me see the inside of their ship. It's part of what got me so interested to be a pilot. But they didn't want to talk about you-know-who." "Yeah." Hornfels looked at the framed photo on their desk. Flight instructor Gossin posed in their spacesuit with two enthusiastic cadets. "It's been hard on them, but I think they accepted it. A lot of folks don't even believe the hatchling story anymore. Think they just got lost." "Well, you knew them. Do you think the story's really true?" "I know it is. Me and Chert spent a whole year documenting our astronomical observations from that day." Hornfels gestured toward a shelf of meticulously ordered logs. "Our sun started to rapidly age, change its light spectrum, and expand. Lots of stars out there started going supernova all at once, like everything was sped up. Then the hatchling, well, they zoom off somewhere, and everything stops blowing up and goes back to normal speed." Ponder listened intently and nodded along, but some things were still foggy. If the hatchling went to the eye, why didn't the world end or whatever? And if they went there and saved the universe already, why don't they come back? "My guess is they're still saving the universe," the old scholar explained. "Me and Gabbro think that time moves slower the closer you get to the eye, so hatchling is probably still there. From their perspective, they've probably only been there a second or two, but since we're alive, it must have all worked out in the end." Ponder reached under their hat so they could scratch their head. "What do you mean? How can they have saved us already by something they do in the future?" "Ask Gabbro," Hornfels quipped. That was their standard answer when things got too quantum-y. Actually, they're a little hard to find these days. Some people didn't like what Gabbro had to say, and others thought they were a prophet. They aren't the kind of person to handle that kind of attention, so they keep to themselves. Ponder couldn't hide their disappointment. They'd come to Outer Wilds, so in their mind, maybe the quantum shaman was just around the corner. That's a shame. Sure, they've got a lot of wisdom to share. Oh, they do, when they feel like it. But enough history. We've got to put that behind us. That's why we're so careful about letting a greenhorn like you into the program, Hornfels said somberly. Ponder started to get nervous that they might not be fully accepted yet. Why's that? Famous or not, one of my students did vanish from existence the moment I gave him launch codes. There's a lot of ways someone could go into space and never come back, Hornfels pointed out. I couldn't take that again. It might shut down Outer Wilds ventures. I'd like to think we've got a lot of pioneering left to do. That's why I'm here, Ponder said. To explore, I mean. We've got a ship for you. The soft-spoken program director looked him dead in the eyes and warned, I can't give you the keys until your instructor is sure that you have the skills, that you'll be responsible with it. Yes, sir, I will, Ponder nodded. Be patient, learn it good, take it slow, they quietly reminded himself. Good. Apparently it took effort to hold a firm tone, and Hornfels dropped it at once. Now, don't be too serious. You're excited, aren't you? Ponder bobbed their head with a much more exuberant nod. Hornfels gave a happy and heartfelt grin. That's more like it. Let me call the second craziest person ever hatched on Timber Hearth. They moved over to the radio and turned the dial. They picked up the receiver and tried a friendly greeting. Ground control to Feldspar. Come in, Lunar Outpost. Nothing. Feldspar? Feldspar, pick up. An odd, cheery voice crackled through. Oh, hey! Hi, Hornfels. Hornfels stifled a laugh. Hello, Chuck. Is Feldspar there? Yeah, well, kinda. I hate to interrupt their nap. That's okay. They looked over to Ponder with a sly smile. You can let 'em know we have the new recruit whenever you're good and ready. Stars above! That's today? The funny voice on the other line was bursting with excitement. The receiver on the other end plopped onto the table. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy boots rushed across wooden floors, getting quieter as they got farther from the radio. Dad? Dad!